literacy languages and teacher training or teacher education. First of all, I would want us to look at the presentation outline. That's the introduction, multilingual education, the benefits and challenges, low literacy languages, teacher training for multilingual context, case studies, best practices, and the end. First of all, when we talk about multilingualism, I just happen to bring in three different definitions. One from the European Commission, which says multilingualism can be defined as the ability of societies, institutions, groups, and individuals to engage on a regular basis with more than one language in their day-to-day lives. So obviously, we've already listened to Dr. Pai's presentation. Obviously, we can say Gambia is a multilingual country. Now, the other definitions are there, which I will not go deep into. Now, if we also look at the prevalence of multilingualism worldwide, now around 43%, according to research, 43% of the world's population is bilingual. That means they can speak two languages, and meaning that they use two languages. Additionally, you have 17% of people who are multilingual. That's they speak more than two languages, or they are fluent in two or more languages. That means approximately 60 to 70 to 75% of the world's population is bilingual or multilingual. Now, if we look at Africa, obviously, Africa is a multilingual continent because it's widespread where you have linguistic diversity. If we take Cameroon, for example, Cameroon with a population of about 27 million and with 250 different languages, together with the English and the French, that some would take French, some would take English, whilst others would take both French and English, plus their other languages and so on. So when you look at sub-Saharan Africa, obviously, there are about 1,500 languages that are in active use. So that's why we say Africa is multilingual. When we come to the Gambia, again, is also a linguistically diverse country, where we have all our languages, the Mandinka, the Wolof, the Fula, the Jola, Sarahule, and the list goes on. But then, what happens is English is used as an official language. Okay. English is used as the official language and is used in education, in government, and obviously in the media. We all learn to speak English. We all are taught to speak English. Now, let me just go quickly through the benefits of multilingualism. Well, I will not look at all of them, but then very few of them, where multilingualism will help increase employability. I think it's very common sometimes when advertisements are made and they will ask if you have more than a language, that is, for example, in the Gambia where we say Wolof, Mandinka, or Serial Jola would be an advantage. So that is what multilingualism. Now, when we talk about multilingual education, obviously we will say that the world now is a diverse playground, if we can say that. And it's full of people from different backgrounds, different locations with different beliefs and so on. But then there is one thing that comes in between them, and that is what language barrier. Language barrier is what always comes between them. And then because of that, you have the diversity of languages that also would cause confusion and difficulty in communicating. So, but then one thing that would help is, or one thing that language barriers can affect is education. When we look at our education system, the reason why our students are failing, I think Mr. Jeng is here, is why it's because of language barriers. They speak Wolof, Mandinka, Fula, Jola, Sarahule, and so on. But then they are all examined in English. They all sit to English exams. And at the end of the day, the results are very poor, and we say the students are not performing. But I'm very sure that if those things were given to them, what they are examined on, if they were given that in their languages, obviously we will see different results and so on. So again, when you look at it, language barrier can affect our educational system. We again look at multilingual education, which is the use of one or more languages, which we have already talked about. But then in multilingual education, we use more than two languages as language of instruction. That's according to research or the definition. when we talk about multilingual education, you are talking about using more than 2 languages. And the aim of multilingual education is to promote linguistic diversity, intercultural dialogue, social inclusion, or to develop a good command of multiple languages in the student while respecting and promoting their linguistic diversities. If we look at what UNESCO is saying, according to UNESCO, the use of at least 3 languages is the basis of multilingual education. And here we talk about the mother tongue or the first language, then the regional or national language, and the international language. So UNICEF defines multilingual education as 3 or more, where you have the mother tongue or the first language, because like Mr. Jeng said, there are some who are not speaking their mother tongue. They're speaking other languages and so on. So the regional language and also the international language. Now, let's look at the Gambian context when it comes to education and multilingualism. Now, in the Gambia, obviously, the Gambia education system, and I think we all are educationists, we know we are facing challenges. And these challenges are all related to multilingualism, because our medium of instruction is what? English. The schools use, how do you call it, English as a medium of instruction, which is sometimes, how do you call, very difficult for our students. And then there is also the code switching, that students would move from one language to the other. Most of our students will think in their languages and would interpret it into English. Obviously, the interpretation poses a challenge. If I am to think in Wolof and then write it in English, obviously it can be very challenging, and that is what happens. And then we also have our low literacy languages, which I will come to in the next slide. Now, when you look at our Gambian languages all have limited written resources. I can pick up a textbook right now in English, a science textbook, and it's written in English. But I cannot pick up a science textbook written in Wolof. I cannot. And that is the reason why we say our languages, especially in the Gambia, and not only in the Gambia, in many countries, are what? They are low literacy languages. Now, what are the benefits of multilingual education? Obviously, the foundation of our shared humanity. Language is more than just a tool when we look at it. It relates to us what? It's how do you call culture, the cognitive, the experience, the tradition, the knowledge, and so on. That is why when you learn a language, you also learn the culture of that language. You cannot learn a language without learning the culture. So it's not just a tool for communication, but it has so many things in it and so on. Then language, the linguistic diversity also. When we look at the world is home to almost about 7,000 spoken or sign languages. And when we look at it, according to UNESCO, there are around 600 languages that have disappeared in the last century. 600 have disappeared. And if that trend continues, we will lose about 90%, even in the Gambia here. If that trend continues, we will lose our Wolof, we will lose our Mandinka, we will lose our Jola, we will lose our Sarahule. Because nowadays, when our children speak Wolof, half of it is broken English or whatever, I don't know. Like, I think there was, how do you call it, something that was, that Dr. Pai put on the, in her presentation, so bit of over there. That's not Wolof. So bit of over there, that's not Wolof. You have what? Wolof and so on. So at the end of the day, in the next 10, 15 years and so on, if we are not careful, our children will not be speaking our Wolof or our Mandinka or our Sarawule. They will be speaking something completely different. And I think that is not what we want and so on. Enhanced learning, obviously, students learn best when they are taught in their languages. I think we have seen example of countries where students perform very well, and because they are taught in their languages. Access and inclusion, here everyone is included. And again, the benefits is also peace and intercultural understanding. Most of the time we have all these problems. In the Gambia, we use some of our traditional, how do we call it again, joking relationship. And all is based on our cultural differences and so on. So if I am a Mandinka and I go to a Mandinka community, I feel very easy there. If there is a problem, the moment I speak Mandinka, they will, how do you call, the problem will be solved. But if I go to a Mandinka community, I cannot speak Mandinka and start speaking Wolof. If I create a problem there, then the problem will will not be solved. It will be escalated and so on. So obviously being multilingual obviously helps in peace and intercultural understanding. Now let's look at low literacy. When we say low literacy, obviously we know what language is, we know what literacy is. Low literacy languages would refer to languages with limited written resources or low literacy rate among its speakers. Let's take Gambia, for example, our Gambia here. Now, our languages, apart from the English, it's now that we are trying to write them. It's now that we are trying to sort of produce resource materials. But most of our languages, we are not writing them. We are not producing resource materials. And as a result, most of the Gambian people are not literate when it comes to their languages. And again, that also has an impact on the English language we are learning. Because the adult generation, like those who are 60 and above, many of them, I cannot give you the numbers, but cannot read and write when we talk about literacy. They cannot read in their own languages, they cannot write. And then they've not gone to school. And because they have not gone to school to learn English, they cannot also read and write. You move along the street and then you meet up with people who cannot even write their names in English. They cannot even write their telephone numbers and so on. If they want to make a call, they have to call somebody and say, can you search for this number for me and so on. That's what literacy when you look at it. And it's all because of the low literacy, our languages that have that low literacy. In the Gambia, we have the national language, which is how they call English. This is the official language. But then we have our Gambian or the African. The reason why I say Gambian or African, because we have other African nationals who are here, and they speak their languages. But then these have limited written resources. Nowadays, when you use social media, you see people trying to write in their languages, to respond to certain comments and so on and so forth. But how many can do that? So when you look at it, our languages still are not developed. When I say not developed, we do not have the resources where we can use them in order to be literate and so on. Now, what are the challenges of that? Obviously, poor performance. We have talked about poor performance in our school system. Every year we talk about the grade 12 results. Why are we talking about the grade 12 results? Because, obviously, our kids are learning in a language that they do not understand or they cannot speak. And they are not being examined in the languages that they understand and can speak. So obviously poor performance. Limited access to education is also another. The inability to read with understanding. Mr. Jeng is here. I think MOPSI has sort of done so many activities on reading. And that is the reason why so many sort of organizations have come up with reading. We had even had the early grade reading. We had Jollyphonics, Segra, and all of that. And all of that was to help our children to read. But up till now, we are facing the same problems. And that is the reason why national language had to come in, to use national languages to teach reading. So here, the poor performance, the limited access to education, inability to read, then content understanding. Our children fail grade 12 or grade 9, not because they do not know the context, but then because they cannot read and understand the text. Before you can solve a maths equation, obviously you should be able to understand the English. But if you do not understand the English, obviously you cannot pass that mathematics. And English is linked to all of these other subject areas, the science, the mathematics, and whatsoever. So obviously it is a challenge. Then the high illiteracy rate, obviously. According to a World Bank report, the Gambia's illiteracy rate stands at 35% for men and 45% for women, we the women. Where are we when it comes to literacy? And all of this is as a result of the low literacy languages we have in the Gambia. We do not have the resources and all of that. Now, let's look at the challenges faced by speakers of low literacy languages in education. Obviously, because of the low literacy languages, the challenges are limited learning materials. The materials are not there, which I think that's what we're trying at the level of MOPSI and other institutions to produce, at least to have learning material. Teacher training. I am from a teacher training institution. But then when you look at it, most of our educators are not specialized in when in sort of multilingualism and also in low literacy languages. Now, there is that balancing oral and written instructions that can be challenging. We are the educators, but have we been trained? Do we have the training when it comes to low literacy languages and when it comes to multilingualism and so on? Assessment and evaluation. I think, again, also, we have all our traditional assessments that rely on written skills. The Gabeke, that was even end of year examinations and so on, all are on traditional, that is written or oral, which all depends on the English language. Again, when you look at it, finding the appropriate assessment methods for low literacy languages also is crucial. We have the socioeconomic factors, which is poverty. We talk about it all the time, and then breaking the cycle. Now, teacher education for multilingualism. We have looked at multilingualism. We've looked at the low level. Now we move to teacher education. When we say teacher education, especially for multilingual context, what are we referring to? Obviously, with an increment or with an increased movement of people. Today, people move from one area to the other area. Goods, information, and everything. The world's classrooms, that is the classrooms all over the world, are becoming more diverse in every day. So in every way. So obviously, it is difficult today to find a teacher in any part of this world who is not faced with a multilingual classroom. There is no teacher who will say, I am not in a multilingual classroom. Even in countries where it's only one language, but yet still you will have children from diverse backgrounds. So Gambia also. Because you go to a class where you have kids who speak Mandinka, Wolof, Serer, some are from other countries and so on. So obviously, it's very important. Some of the classrooms also are multilingual because the children have home languages, home language practices that differ from those of the selected school. For example, the children come from homes and the language that they speak is different from the language that they speak in school. So obviously that also is multilingual. You have other classrooms are multilingual in that the purpose of instruction is precisely to make children bilingual. For example, you have some private schools in the Gambia, like Diana Mariam, you have CBEC. Now they purposely make the school multilingual or bilingual by teaching English, French, and Arabic, and so on. So some schools make their schools or make the children bilingual, whilst other schools, when you look at other classrooms, from home they are, and then when they come, they speak a different language. So obviously, you can no longer talk about that specialist alone. All teachers must be given that training when it comes to multilingualism. Here, I just got some quotations from different professors, and in one it says, in multilingual classroom, knowledge about multilingualism and multiculturalism is essential for teachers in order to understand the background and ability of each and every student and provide them with tailored education. Is that what we are doing in our schools? But that is what should happen. That is what should happen, because if we are in a multilingual classroom, obviously, we should have that knowledge of multilingualism and multiculturalism and should be able to take care of the needs of every child in that classroom. Well, it might be something challenging in the Gambia, but I'm sure we'll be able to get there one day, Mr. Jeng. Yes, okay? Yes. Multilingualism enrich our world. Teachers can nurture and encourage it among students. So these are some of the quotes which I will not look at all. Now, preparing teachers to be multilingual teachers. In the Gambia, I think there is no teacher that does not go into a multilingual class. So preparing teachers for practice, obviously across all educational sector, would occupy an important position in efforts to improve educational outcomes and quality for all stakeholders. That's a must. It is an important aspect when it comes to preparing teachers. Again, when it comes to preparing teachers also, the demand for multilingualism through language education and the challenges of teaching in diversely multilingual classroom, both important of educational policy and instructional priorities. Now, this is from a quotation, and it's important that when that multilingual educators or teachers must address some of these demands and so on. Now, again, teacher education, when we look at it, is a global commodity, and teacher educators cannot ignore the needs for multilingual pedagogies. I think that is why we are teacher educators, the pedagogies. So if there is no multilingual pedagogy, obviously, we'll continue to face the challenge. So equipping teachers to teach in both English, French, Arabic, and the students' first language is a necessity and is a must. Now, the cultural competencies, understanding the diverse linguistic background. Because in a multilingual classroom, it is not just teaching language or teaching and going. You must also be able to understand the diverse linguistic background. And that is how you will be able to sort of sort out the issues relating to the students, understand them, and give them the necessary support. The inclusive practices are also there, supporting students who speak or who come from low literacy languages. And I think here in the Gambia, all the students come from low literacy languages. Because if you are a Wolof, obviously Wolof is not written. If you are Mandinka, Mandinka is not written. If you are Sarahule, it is not written. Now, multilingual educators also need to be prepared with strategies that makes it possible for learners to transit knowledge and cognitive strategies across languages. This is very important as teacher educators. Now, what are the challenges when it comes to teacher educators or teacher education as relates to multilingualism? When we look at it, it's important to note that each multilingual classroom community is multilingual in their own way, because each of these multilingual classrooms are different. Yeah, there are no two multilingual classes that are the same. They're all different. So obviously, the language, the teaching and learning is a socially constructed, socially and culturally situated activity, and the purpose of learning the existing linguistic resources of learners, and the setting and the use, etc. All these things are important. The setting, the languages used, and so on are all important. Language teacher educators need to be built around pedagogies. I've talked about pedagogy, I'm talking about it again. And these pedagogies are what prepares learners for participation in multilingual societies in which many users of targeted languages would often have extensive multilingual resources. So the pedagogies are important when we talk about it. So here, this could be a challenge when it comes to teacher education. Now again, the challenges, some of the major challenges here. Lack of the qualified personnel. I'm a teacher educator, I'm from Gambia College, I'm the vice principal, but I think I will not shy away from the fact that we lack the qualified personnel when it comes to teaching multilingualism and also national language. I think at the moment we have started implementing it, teaching it, but we rely heavily on MOPSI to support our teacher education policy. Because apart from one individual we have at the college, all the others come from MOPSI. So obviously, the expertise is again a challenge when it comes to teacher education. Limited resources and materials. I think we've talked about that. And I think that is the reason why this toolkit is very important. Because obviously it can serve as resource materials for us, which we can use, and it will also help in developing our resource materials and so on. Integration into existing curricula. I think that's again also something very challenging, and that's also a challenge for teacher educators. I think my head of School of Education is here. We have tried it for so many years to implement this at the Gambia College, to make sure that we include national language in our curricula, but it has taken us so many years. I remember the so many going ups and down with Mr. Jeng. And today, at least we can say we've started. And I am also hopeful that with the toolkit, which we also are hoping to pilot test next academic year, obviously that would help us and so on. Now, integrating it into the into existing curricula, I think, is a challenge. Then the historical reluctance, obviously we've talked about that. I think Dr. Pai talked about it, Mr. Jiang also talked about it. That is government, that is the political will to make sure that this is done, I think is also a challenge. And then competition from international languages. Obviously here, there is that competition between our national language and English and French and all of that. So this again also is a big challenge. Now, teacher competencies in multilingual setups. Here, what are the 3 strands of competencies? I think time is up, so let me just wrap up quickly. According to Grace and Kelly, proposed 3 strands of competencies for teacher education for multilingual educators. That's understanding about bilingual students, knowledge of language and bilingualism or multilingualism, and awareness of how to deliver pedagogy for multilingualism. I think these are very important when it comes to teacher education. This is just a quick case study. I think when you look at case studies and best practices, South Africa is one of the countries that has used a multilingual approach, because South Africa have recognized 11 official languages, and then the schools, they use it. We talk about India. I think it's India where you go to, every community or every state has its own language and all of that and so on. So I think these are examples that we can, or example of countries where we can learn from, and it will really help us. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Jarama, Arbarka. Thank you, and Jerejef.